You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Hi everyone, Debbie Loucks here to share more of Monty's concepts and wisdom about the trust and insight we can learn from horses and apply to our own lives. Welcome to this 12th chapter, reading of the Horse Sense for People book by Monty Roberts. The Blackboard System, an objective way for parents dealing with the behavior of their children. We were raised with the acronym PICNIC. Positive instant consequences and negative instant consequences. I sat down to chat with Monty, Dad, to ask him more about the concepts behind this for children and for horses. Listen in. Well, welcome. This is another chapter of Horse Sense for People that we've been enjoying, one a month, put in the podcast, and I'm excited about this one being introduced today with the man himself, Monty, because it involves our family, really. I'm a daughter and you're the father. So more than just a chapter about positive instant consequences and negative instant consequences between child and parent, this chapter actually, if you read between the lines on this, it's really a horse person and a horse that we're talking about too. So I believe that the roots of the way we were raised with consequences is what a lot of parents are searching for these days. How do you raise a child? What does discipline look like? What does reward look like? And then I'll ask you a question about how that transfers to the learning that you have from horses. Because the chapter speaks for itself on how you handle children, and I think people will find it fascinating. Answers the question that people ask quite often about child raising, because, surprise, you had 47 foster kids before it was all said and done. First one being when I was but 6 months old. And you always say, she ruined you for foster kids because she was so perfect. 12-year-old girl taking lessons from you, right? But what I wanted to seek out is, in this chapter, you're going to tell us some really practical and tried and true ways to work with children. Let's call it work with children, speak with children, live with children in order to positively affect their upbringing. And actually, I think most of the foster kids and myself, the ones that actually are still alive, it was a drug era. You know, the 1960s is where you had a lot of them, 60s and 70s. You had a lot of children come through the house. And it was a druggy era. It was a tough era in the United States. So it wasn't easy, cute, little, adorable, bouncy kids. It was a lot of teenage angst in the house, a few at a time. And you dealt with that in a really precious way, I think. And I think the work ethic for a lot of these kids came out incredibly. And we won't even go into the results, because if we start naming names, somebody's going to get forgotten here. But suffice it to say, if you dig a little on Monty Roberts and some of the amazing attributes that these kids have had over the years, they've done amazing things in not just the equestrian or equine industry, but all over the world in their own ways. So my first question is, if this chapter, Dad, is about raising up children and creating those environments, where did you learn those skill sets that we're going to hear in this chapter?
Well, that's a pretty easy one for me because I do have a good memory, and I lived in a tight-knit family that was in the horse business and in a horse facility. So the combination of horses and children is so close one to the other. It's amazing how young horses, if you put them to work for some reason because they did something you don't like, they respond. And they'll push that one away and go another way. If you reward them with taking the work away, they will respond. So horses are children in so many ways. And I started in about 1960, 50.
Yeah.
I started in
late 50s.
approximately
Late 50s. Mm-hmm.
late 50s to combine those two individuals, horses and children. And the horses taught me incredible amounts in the action of children. And I had professors in universities in Europe and in California that often smirked at the thought of it when I first laid it out.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them threw me away after a month or so.
They didn't want you to compare horses to children.
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't
all
want that, and their facility where they were professors or whatever didn't want them to do that. And I remember one facility where I had to go to the headmaster of that particular part of the university and explain everything to him. And finally, he rested back in his chair and he said, let's let this lady instructor of ours take over and see what you can do. And we had children from Africa and about 5 different countries there in Europe that were violent, that had actually killed people. And it was a violent time right after the Second World War. And I learned a lot from them because I would use my horse knowledge and I would place them in that position and then watch them change. And so I was in school too.
Mm-hmm. It's a university.
But my daughter, Debbie, has just let me hear about half an hour or so of a...
This is our audio of your chapter in the book, Horse Sense for People. And I think this is one of your proudest chapters because it is so tried and true, and people find it unique because it's not about the horses, but it really is, isn't it?
Yes, it is about the horses. And the horses became the professors.
Right.
Showing these kids how they would do so well if we got it right, and so wrong if we made a mistake. And horses were more outgoing than kids were. The kids that came to me were kind of, bashful and back under the table or something. And the horses didn't know me from Adam's off ox. So I used the horses a lot. And the kids really learned a lot from them. And they kept bringing me kids that were legally in trouble with having caused injury to some other child or to a girlfriend or a wife. And so I continued to work. Piece of my life. And I'm still learning things more from people now than horses because I can't get around the horses that much and I can't do that much with the horses. But what I can do is get up on that round pen and I can start to work with a horse and I can watch the horses say to me, wow, this is pretty good. Where did you learn this? We never heard anybody doing this. We had whips coming at us and we had chains coming at us and we had all kinds of negative things in our lives. And you just simply won't put negative things in our lives, but you give us very good trophies for making the right decisions and you put us to work for the wrong decisions, but no violence at all.
But what I'd like to do right here is ask the listener to look through the eyes that you're looking through today and listen to the wisdom not only for children, maybe employees, maybe the whole family, grown family, and also, most importantly, to our listeners, is listen to the wisdom for horses.
Blackboards. For decades now, I've utilized a system that has worked well to provide parents with an objective way of dealing with the behavior of their children. Early on in its development, I gave it a name, the Blackboard System. By its very title, you can see that it preceded the wonderful boards that we have these days that stay nice and clean, no messy chalk or squeaks that set your teeth on edge. The essential elements of this system are as follows. Each child has 2 boards, about 18 inches by 2 feet on average. The boards are placed in a prominent position where it's easy for both the parents and the child to view. An example of a place that would not be ideal is the inside of a clothes closet within the child's bedroom. This position simply smacks of intrusion at the outset. The board belongs to both the child and the parent, and so should hang in a common place. I prefer to have them outside the child's room altogether, in an area that is more open to the entire family. Obviously, homes will vary greatly regarding the availability of space for the placement of the boards. Ideally, it might be in an area just off the kitchen, with wall space sufficient to do the job. Some parents have reported to me that placing the boards in the garage has worked for them as well. The primary objective of this system is to bypass the parent as the administrator of discipline or punishment. It sets up a contract whereby the child and the parent bilaterally agree on matters regarding the response to behavioral episodes, positive or negative. A secondary goal, possibly even more important, is to bring the young person into an understanding of contracts and responsibilities. I have found this system extremely effective in educating young people to the principle, my word is my bond. There was a time on this earth when a high percentage of people lived by this theory. It might have been a part of the world where I was raised or the rural nature of the environment, but I can recall a time when you shook a man's hand while looking him in the eye, which was better than today's legal contracts. It would be wonderful if that was still the case today. Unfortunately, it is not. Can you imagine, however, how much better chance your children would have in life if that became a main theme for them? Today, when integrity is in such short supply, your child could be a real hero if people knew they could count on his word. I often say it's not a bad idea if the 2 boards supplied to each child are of a different color or identified by different frames or some other feature. As the content of these boards will be the opposite, then a different visual appearance dramatizes that fact. I recommend one board is labeled positive and the other negative. In addition, there should be the name of the child and the name of the parent. The clear implication here is that one board will deal with positive factors of the child's life, while the other board with the negative. Furthermore, it clearly establishes that the particular young person and the parent are involved with the board and its objective. It's critical that the parent first sit down with the child and calmly talk through this procedure, allowing no emotion to come into the explanation. Initiating this system should never appear to the child to be the act of a desperate parent seeking some bizarre method of dealing with the problems of their relationship. I recommend that parents explain to the child that they feel they've not been altogether fair in the past, and that it is now time to put their relationship on a more positive course. The parent should indicate that they feel that the principles of this system will be an improvement for both the child and the parent. Furthermore, the parent should make it abundantly clear that there will never be a rule to deal with a negative consequence unless there's a counterpoint to that scenario, allowing a positive consequence when there is a positive action. Before putting this system into effect, it is always helpful if the child views the procedure as a chance to get more out of life than they were getting before the initiation of the system. When it has been properly carried out, I have found this procedure to be easily the most important avenue to successful parent-child relationships that I have experienced in the 40 years plus studying this area. I recommend that you first deal with the positive board. Obviously, it is the parent's obligation to mold the program to appropriately fit the child in question. A 2-year-old girl clearly sits at the opposite end of the spectrum from a 17-year-old boy. A shy, reserved individual who has difficulty meeting strangers is opposite to the outgoing youngster who never perceives anyone as a stranger. It is critical to consider your geographic location. Inner cities are far different from a rural environment, for instance. I recommend the Blackboard system for children as young as 2 years old, despite the fact that they may or may not be able to read or write. The parent can describe what the number 1 is, and then taking the child's hand with a marker can help the child place its initials under the one-line contract. It is amazing what those little brains can comprehend. The parent then initials the contract as well. After signing, the parent should make eye-to-eye contact with the child, shake his hand, and say, "We now have a contract." Imagine, for example, that we're dealing with Sally, a 2-year-old. Sally takes delight in spitting at people. The positive contract might well read, "No spitting at anyone for 2 full days, and I'll take you to visit your grandma." Each of you initial the contract and shake hands. Next, you will deal with the negative board, which could read, "If you spit at anyone, within the next 2 days, you will scrub 1 select tile in the shower." You each sign it and shake hands. I find it much better to list an action rather than selecting a forfeit, which could prevent them from doing something they enjoy.
You've probably heard Monty say, adrenaline up, learning down, and adrenaline down, learning up. That applies to care, too. At the Monty Roberts International Learning Center, we use our Drimee Solarium to give horses a moment to relax and reset and feel good in their bodies. The gentle infrared heat helps loosen the muscles, improve their circulation, and support recovery after their work. And when a horse feels good, they can think and learn and connect. That's why Drimee fits so naturally into what we do. Visit DrimeeUSA.com and use the code Monty1 for $150 off. That's DRIMEEUSA.com. There's a moment when a horse stops resisting and starts listening. Not because they have to, but because they understand. That moment is what Monty Roberts has spent a lifetime teaching. With the Equus Online University, you can learn to create that moment yourself, step by step with real horses, real situations, and Monty guiding you along the way. It's not about control, it's about communication. Visit MontyRobertsUniversity.com. Because if you listen to your horse will listen to you.
A parent may well decide that as a negative consequence, a child might be restricted from watching cartoons or playing with friends, and if the parent feels that it is the most effective discipline, then there is nothing terribly wrong with that. I recommend, however, the utilization of completing some activity, rather than placing a restriction on the child as a negative consequence. It should be noted at this point that I do not recommend food or money on either side of the blackboard procedure. We all know that Sally's not going to be very effective at cleaning any of the tiles in the shower, but it is simply not our purpose to get the tile clean. It should be clear that young people not handle poisonous or abrasive cleansers, and I recommend, in these particular cases, that you are with the child constantly and using only mild soap with water. Make it clear to the child that he or she is working as a negative consequence. I have found this to be an effective negative activity for tiny children because it is fairly easy to complete the procedure without creating an enormous mess. Sally should be notified that should the negative behavior persist, the number of tiles will be increased. There is no excuse for not going to Grandma's house if Sally doesn't spit, just as there is no reason why she can't clean the tile if she does. Some children will attempt to control the parent by throwing a terrible tantrum when faced with the prospect of cleaning the tile. I suggest that just as I do with my horses, when they act out in a negative fashion, the parent simply steps back and smiles. While smiling, the parent is less likely to think of harsh measures to deal with the obstreperous behavior. The parent needs to hold fast to the belief that they're doing the right thing. A tantrum is part of the training procedure and should be viewed as such. When the tantrum's over, then the child cleans the tile. Parents should be the judge of how far to encourage the child to get the tile clean. Remember that you begin accepting the slightest positive that you can find, and then reward the child by stating that it has completed its task. It's recommended that the parent or guardian view this moment as a victory. Give the child a hug and say how much you love her, letting her know that you are members of the same team. In the event that Sally completes the 2 days successfully and you're on your way to Grandma's house, I strongly suggest that in the presence of the child, you say to Grandma, "Sally has been a good little girl." Make it clear in her presence she is being rewarded for good behavior. The parent need not mention the negative behavior that might have occurred, because it would only be a source of embarrassment. Any utilization of discipline that would tend to demean or shame the child falls into the same category as corporal punishment. It is extrinsic training rather than intrinsic. The parent should not get involved in either encouraging a positive decision or discouraging a negative one. It is important that the parent hold the mindset that the child's decision is what's important. This is a critical element in creating an intrinsic environment and not an extrinsic one. Sally arrived at the designated time and had not committed the negative act. I recommend that the parent take the time to shake the hand of the child, looking her in the eye and congratulating her on her victory. A hug is in order, and a big smile never hurts. I believe that it is important for the child to feel loved and accepted by the parent. This will create the feeling within the child that the parent is a safe place to be. It is important to designate the time for the enactment of the positive consequence, a visit to Grandma's house. Let us now consider the negative outcome. Since our contract was clear and concise, it is evident what should happen if the child acts out by spitting on someone. If at all possible, the negative consequences should begin immediately. If the child chooses a time when you're away from home, it will be necessary to wait, utilizing the earliest time possible to affect the negative aspects of the contract. At the moment the child spits, the parent should, in my opinion, take on a demeanor of sorrow, never anger. It is important to let the child know that you're disappointed at this outcome. Since, however, it is the child's decision, you, the parent, are essentially detached from that decision process, and you're also affected by the contract in a negative way. It is essential for the child to still feel loved and accepted, but to be made aware that you're saddened that the child has not lived up to the contract and must now carry out the negative consequences. Throughout the execution of the scrubbing of the tile, the parent should take the position that they are very sorry the child has to do this at all. The parent should leave the child with the hope that they will be more successful with their contracts in the future. It is critical that the parent not be discouraged by early contractual failures. They are, in fact, as important to the learning process as contractual successes. If a parent is experiencing an extremely high percentage of successes, it is quite possible that they are not setting their goals high enough for their child. I believe that they should then increase their expectations by raising the standards, remembering that when you increase the negative consequences, you must also increase the potential for rewards. You must theoretically keep the boards level, lifting or lowering them in a parallel fashion. Now that we've outlined one contract, for one little girl, I believe it is important to make clear that the principles should be the same when dealing with all ages, sexes, and lifestyles, without significantly changing the parameters. It is also critical for the parent to know that the number of issues dealt with is important. I've learned over the years that the parent or adult guardian should begin with 1, 2, or 3 issues, and then expand this number only when it's clear that the child is handling it well. Obviously, the older child, that is thought to be relatively normal, will be able to cope with more issues than the very young child, or one that is troubled to a significant degree. One of the most often asked questions regarding my contract system is, what do I do with my child that simply says, I'm not doing it? The answer is, first smile. Then carefully reestablish that so long as there are incompleted negative consequences, there can be no positive consequences. The negative board must be entirely cleared off before any rewards can be reaped from the positive board. Until the contract is fulfilled, the child's life is restricted to the basic essentials. Violence or dishonesty in any form is totally unacceptable. Parent and child may go on to agree that even legal substances, such as cigarettes and alcohol, may simply not be a part of their existence. So long as the parent or guardian of the child can bilaterally arrive at a mutually agreeable arrangement, they can attach to these agreements any consequences they deem appropriate. The parent should agree right along with the child that these things won't be a part of their life either. This is a part of being a good role model. Young people admire parents' willingness to enter into an agreement like this and be fully prepared to accept the negative consequences. When working with teenagers, the consequences, both negative and positive, take on quite different dimensions from that which was outlined in the initial example. The parent is advised to stay with things to do rather than things not to do, and to eliminate food or money whenever possible from the list of consequences. I have found the most positive consequence for a teenage boy in our part of the world is to take him fishing. It is generally a quiet time together and takes place in pleasant surroundings. It is an activity that allows the parent and the child to have ample time for calm and reflective conversation, and I believe it produces positive results. While the teenage girl may enjoy the same activities as a teenage boy, time with the child should be spent specifically for them and with activities they find most enjoyable. What the parent likes to do should not be important in the selection process. Teenage girls love clothes, plays, concerts, and while this is a generalization, it certainly is often true. Remember how much teenage girls love horses. These wonderful animals can be a very vital, positive influence in the life of a teenage miss. On the negative side of the issue, the teenage boy can really get some things done around the place. Pat and I have got ditches dug on our farm that we never even had pipes for.
We are grateful that this episode is brought to you by our title sponsor, Drimee Solarium, helping horses feel their best with therapeutic infrared technology trusted by professional barns around the world. Visit DrimeeUSA.com and use the promo code Monty1 for $150 off your purchase. And by our show sponsor, MontyRobertsUniversity.com, the most comprehensive place anywhere to learn Monty Roberts' concepts and methods of nonviolent horsemanship. For details about today's show, go to HorsemanshipRadio.com, where you can find links and photos and more information about our guests. We love connecting with our listeners, so please follow us on Facebook under facebook.com/Monty Roberts, and Instagram.com/Monty_Roberts. Be sure to visit all the other great shows on the Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com. Until next time, have many happy horse hours.